In 2006, Sarah and I got married, and we received some incredible gifts. We actually don't know all the gifts that we received because our card box was stolen out of the parking lot of the church, and so we don't know how much money we got for our wedding. But one of the gifts that we did receive was a sleigh bed that Sarah really wanted. It was this nice cherry wood sleigh bed. We actually still have it. It's now Keeley's bed frame. We still have it in the room upstairs at the house. But we got it in 2006, and we were super excited. It was a queen-size bed. Got it to our apartment in Oklahoma City where we were living at the time after going on our honeymoon. And we set it up, and again, we were so excited about this thing, and by the time we got it set up, we realized this room isn't big enough for this bed. This bed was big enough that in the room that we were in, I would get out on my side of the bed, and it would be get my feet over. You know how sometimes you do that whole lean forward on your bed thing in the morning when you're trying to, couldn't do it. Or I would slam my head against the wall. It was a get out of bed and then do the little shimmy to the end of the bed so that I could turn and I could walk out of our room, where there was a dresser that you could not leave the drawers open because there wasn't room to walk in between the bed and the dresser if the drawer was open. So in some ways it was a great thing because it forced us to actually close the drawers on our dresser. Sarah, on her side of the bed, she remembers this. I don't remember this part. She just gave up. She's like, I didn't even try to crawl, shimmy on my side of the bed. I just crawled over the end of that thing every morning. This was how big that first apartment was. Our bathroom was right across the what feels like a 2-foot hall. Now that I think about it, it was probably standard width for a hallway. But the bathroom was one of those where you could reach the sink from the shower and even go to the bathroom in the middle if you wanted to. Never tried it, but you could. It was teeny tiny. Had a little hallway that went down to this living room that barely fit our table for two. And then in the kitchen, you had this really narrow kitchen where, you can't pass each other without bumping into each other. But let's be real, we were newlyweds. That was perfectly fine to bump into each other as much as I desired. And then you had the living room, which it was big enough for a TV and a couch and a little computer over in the corner. But I've been thinking a lot about that apartment lately, especially over the course of the past month. You could fit the entire apartment in the offices that we have here in this church building. It's like, take my office off. You could fit the entire apartment in the rest of the offices. But as I thought back to that apartment over the course of the past month or so, and thought about how tight the spaces were, I've realized while our house is significantly larger these days than that apartment was, I'm not any happier about my house than I was about that teeny tiny little apartment. In fact, now that I love our house, my wife loves our house, our kids love our house, we're not complaining about the house at all, but having this bigger house also means that I've got a lot more to take care of than I did with that teeny tiny little apartment. In fact, because I didn't own the apartment, I didn't have to repair anything in that place. I just called up the super, and they'd come out and they would fix anything. When the toilet, when the pipes would rattle because somebody, not one of us, we'll just say, had a very good visit to the restroom, and then the pipes rattled for the rest of the time that we lived in this, I didn't have to take care of it. The super took care of it. So I didn't have to pay for any of that. When I look back at the budget, it was significantly less to live in that apartment than it is to live in our home now. It was significantly less cleaning that had to go on in that. We've got 3 kids now that can help with the cleaning, and we still have more cleaning to do for the 2 of us than we did in that tiny little apartment. There is, again, as I think about it, as small as it was, I'm not saying that there aren't plenty of pieces in my life that bring me happiness and joy, but the apartment versus the house, there is no added happiness in my life because of having the much bigger house. But as I went out on Black Friday, and I did now my dad was here, and my dad does not like to shop. So he and I didn't really do a whole lot of shopping, and Judah, he hung along with us because he knew that we weren't going to be going to the mall and we weren't going to be going to some of those stores that all the ladies were going to go to. Instead, we went to Rural King, and then we got foot massages. That was so much more enjoyable. But as we waited in the lines, for those of you who have been to Evansville, which is most of us, and you've gone into the Target area, because we ate at Mod Pizza, and they have, I don't know who designed this, but they have the one exit to get out of Target and all those restaurants and stores in there, and we waited 30 minutes to leave the parking lot of of Target area. It just hit me again with this house of, we've got a bigger house now, but where is the added happiness that came from the bigger house? And I've been thinking a lot lately, and I don't know if you thought about this or not, but I've been thinking a lot lately about all of the things that I've gotten for Christmas over the years of my life. I've thought about the things that I've gotten my children for Christmas over their short lives. And how many of those things gave me the promised happiness that was going to come with those? Maybe temporarily I received some of it, but where was the long-term promised happiness of that? I don't know what your kids asked for Christmas last year or the year before or what you asked for, but I wonder if you take some time and you think about how long did that joy of opening the gift last before that pair of shoes no longer brought that joy that was promised with that pair of shoes. Or last year, the big ticket item being the Stanley water bottles. How long was it before the Stanley wasn't good enough anymore? And instead it was the Owala or whatever else came next. Or I don't know what the big ticket item is this year, but how long is it going to be before that big ticket item this year that we all want so badly no longer provides the happiness that it's promising to provide us? I think if you've reached my age, or even if you're even close to my age, and you stop for a second, you understand that, no, that's absolutely true, and we live it each and every single year. But every single year, we go out and we try and fulfill the Christmas lists because that's what will bring peace into our home and joy into our home. And then for an hour on Sunday morning, we remind ourselves that, oh, no, Jesus is the reason for the season. Jesus is the reason for Christmas. But my question for myself in our own home, and the question that I would ask all of us in here is, we say that, but do we really mean that? Or do we believe that getting the right gift is going to actually bring joy and peace and hope and love into our homes? Dan and Shay, a country music band that my daughters and my wife absolutely love. They went to their concert over the course of this past year at some point. I don't remember when it was. I remember that Tegan had the flu while she went to the concert, so by the time it was over, she was crying because her throat was on fire, but she had sung the entire time anyway, because that's what you do. But Dan and Shay, they wrote a song called Bigger Houses, and when I heard that song, I was like, oh man, like they're not a Christian band. And from what I'm told that the concert was like, although it was a good concert, when I'm told as far as their language goes during the concert, it's pretty evident they're not a Christian band. But man, they wrote this song, and I think they absolutely nailed it. That happiness isn't found in bigger houses, because there's always going to be greener grass in the yard next door, or a shined-up Chevy a little newer than yours. And then, they go on and on. I won't sing you the whole song. But that's the message that we share every Christmas. It's a message that we share throughout the year, but do we remember that message? Do we live by that message? In our homes, are we truly teaching that message? Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting good gifts for people. But what are we communicating with those good gifts? Are we communicating that this gift will bring you joy and peace? Or is the joy and the peace and the hope actually from giving the gift? Because we know, whether or not we're teaching it to young people or not, we know as older people it's not going to last. The new Madden game comes out every year. I know Madden doesn't play that much anymore, but that was my thing. I always wanted the newest Madden game. That was going to bring me the most happiness. And then by February, I'd kind of lost interest in it because I'd already done it. I had everything that it had to offer. Christmas is about the Word. Christmas is about the Word that was with God in the beginning. The Word that through everything, all of this was created. I mean, stop and think about what we read in John chapter 1. Stop and think about the significance of who this Word is, who this Jesus is, that we talk about but maybe don't really think about or remember. Through him, everything was created. The ultimate game maker, the ultimate toy maker. Through him, everything was created. Sitting on a throne in the heavens, the Word in the beginning was with God, and the Word was God. And then that Word, this ultimate toy maker, the creator of it all, became flesh and took up residence among us. Now, it's easy to say that, and it's easy to be like, yeah, we know that, but think about the significance of that. As we spend our time pursuing what we're going to refer to for the next month as bigger houses. When I say bigger houses, church, I'm not just talking about houses. I'm talking about all of the worldly things that we pursue to find our peace and our joy and our love and our hope, which we're going to define for the next month as true happiness. Happiness not being this fleeting feeling that I have for a moment, for the next month, but happiness is being someone who is full of joy and full of peace and full of love and full of hope. That when we are filled with those things, we truly experience happiness. That the one who was on a throne, watching his creation pursue all of this other stuff, all of these bigger houses to find their happiness, gave up a throne. Gave up a throne in the kingdom of heaven to take up his residence among us and to begin it all without even starting in a true home. Starting it in what we refer to as a manger or a stable. From a throne to a stable. And then as we read his story, this one who had everything, the one who was more full of peace and joy and hope and love than any human being who has ever lived or will ever live, the one who had true happiness at all moments, even when everything around him was falling apart, because he had those four things, he went from a manger to running for his life. Now, he didn't know he was running for his life. He was a baby. But his parents running for his life to protect him from being murdered by the king. And then eventually, after being in exile for a couple of years, moving to a tiny, podunk little town called Nazareth. Now, that one we can understand a little bit. We live in a small area. We live in a small town. Even if you live in Vincennes or Washington or one of the surrounding towns here, it's still, by typical city standards, it's a small town. So we get that part a little bit. But remember, he started on a throne and moved to the tiny town in a place where when people would hear it referred to, they'd be like, Nazareth? Nothing good comes from Nazareth. Gave up all of his notoriety to take up residence among the people. He could have had anything. He could have had any of the bigger houses or the nicer things or the comforts that the people around him that he had created in the first place, that they were pursuing. He could have had it all, and he gave it all up, and yet he is the standard. He is the one for us to be like. He is the one who was full of peace, joy, hope, and love. He was the one full of happiness, not the ones who were pursuing all the things. He was full of it. And he moved to a place called Nazareth, and he grew, and eventually went out on the road where he was functionally homeless for 3 years. From a throne to a manger to running for their lives to a tiny little town to homeless. And yet he was the one who, because of his behavior and because of his attitude, brought peace into people's lives, brought joy into people's lives, brought hope into people's lives, brought love into people's lives. He was the one. And as he traveled around and he saw those who were sick and he healed them, and they had their temporary happiness because of it, he also introduced people to what it means to have true, eternal happiness. And some took it. Some ran with it. Some were like, this is incredible. This is exactly what we need. And many of them believed so much of it and received so much of it that they moved into giant mansions and they had all the things. No, they gave their lives for it. That was how valuable this thing was that he was offering was to them, that they gave their lives to have it and to keep it. Crucified upside down, beheaded, drugged through the streets by horses until they died. It was all worth it to receive the happiness that he offered instead of the happiness that the world had to offer them. Ari got up here and she read a fictional letter. No, Matthew didn't really write that letter. But she wrote a fictional letter that we're crediting to a man named Matthew, who was a tax collector who would have been wealthy beyond all of his neighbors' dreams, who had what the world had to offer, and he gave it all up. Because what Jesus was offering was better than all of that stuff. What Jesus was offering was something that would last forever. It wasn't something that was going to make it till February before he found the next thing that would make it even better and replace it. It was worth giving his life for, not just $100. And then Jesus, after being functionally homeless for 3 years, from a throne to a manger to on the run to a tiny town to no home, found himself on a cross. Found himself beaten and abused, bloody, insulted, spit on, stretched out on a cross with nails through his hands or wrists, through his feet, giving of his life for the people who would pursue everything other than him to find happiness, but so that they might have the chance to hear his message and to find true happiness. And he went from that cross to a tomb that wasn't even his own. He didn't have the money to buy a tomb and have it prepared before he died. His family didn't know that he was about to die, so they weren't preparing anything for him. So he had to go and be buried in a tomb that wasn't even his own to start with. But also that something could happen. Also that 2,000 years later, we could still be talking about the hope and the joy and the love and the peace that is offered only by him. that is offered only by the one who went from a throne to a manger, to on the run, to a tiny town, to being homeless, to put on a cross, to a tomb that wasn't his own, because he came out of that tomb and he went back to a throne. And he invites each and every one of us to receive what he has to offer. But 2,000 years later, it is so easy to think that the true happiness and peace and joy and love and hope is going to come from an object, or is going to come from whatever comfort it is that we seek, whether it be food or whatever else. That true happiness is going to come from an addiction that we might be participating in. That true happiness, as all of these other things will give it to us, when he's sitting there saying, the only true happiness is through me. And we're going to come in here each and every Sunday for the next several Sundays, and I'm going to remind you of that each and every Sunday. And many of us, we're going to remind ourselves of that each and every Sunday morning. And then we're going to leave this place, and the world is going to tell us, no, this is where true happiness is found. But church, if we will open our eyes, we can see it all around us, that the true happiness has never been found in the things that the world has to promise us. It's never been there in the gift that is opened up on Christmas morning. Again, that's not to say that giving gifts is wrong. I'm not up here to say, hey, this year, don't give your kids any gifts. Just tell them about Jesus. No, give your kids gifts. But what if this year it wasn't just about fulfilling their entire Christmas list, and instead this year it was about really expressing to them where happiness is going to be found? Your kids might hear it and be like, oh, great. My parents are now those Jesus Bible-thumping freaks. But you know what? And this, I'm putting myself right into this. If that's a response that my kids give, it's probably because I haven't been teaching them enough about Jesus being true happiness until this year. Because it shouldn't catch them off guard for us to teach them about Jesus truly being the place that we find hope and joy and love and peace. It shouldn't be a shock to their system when mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle or whoever it might be are now teaching them primarily about Jesus at Christmas time instead of Santa Claus or reindeer. What if joy to the world wasn't expected to come from what's under the tree? And instead, they expect that it comes from the one who came from a throne. But it won't happen by us just remembering it for an hour on Sunday morning, or less than an hour on Sunday morning. What if this year we truly commit to making Christmas about Jesus? And it's not just about the baby boy who was born, who the song loves to tell us didn't cry, but come on. No crying he makes, baloney. He was fully human. He cried. He did all the other things that babies do. But what if this year it wasn't just teaching them about the baby, and it was teaching them about the king? The king who came to earth, gave up his throne, and took on a cross instead, so that we could have life, so that we could have joy and peace and hope and love, all the things these candles represent. What if that was the conversation at home? I'm going to invite Lori up. And we're going to take some time this morning, and I guess I can't tell you what you're going to remember, but as a body, we're going to take some time and we're going to remember that King, that Word, who came from a throne and went to a manger, went on the run, went to the tiny town, became homeless, got put on a cross, went to a tomb, returned to a throne, and said, I'm going to bring you with me. Church, my prayer is that we do this year experience peace and joy and hope and love in ways that we never have before. But I can tell you from experience, and I can tell you from what I've seen for my entire 41 years, and what if we would stop and look, we would admit it doesn't come from bigger houses. It only comes from that King.
Okay, we are going to prepare our hearts to receive communion. I am going to ask the servers to go ahead and come forward and prepare the table. 1 Corinthians 12:27 reminds us to take some time to examine our hearts, to confess and prepare for the elements, to thoroughly consider their meaning. Take some time to do that while the servers prepare. And as always, exit on your left and return to your pews on your right. If you would hold your elements, we're going to take them together. Be with Jesus. If you have been in a small group or listened to some of the sermons lately, that's a term that we've been throwing around for the past 8 weeks or so. Be with Jesus. If you haven't heard that term, ask somebody. Find out what it's all about. So today, as we practice communion, let's spend some time with Jesus as his apprentices. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. Passover has arrived. It's a time to celebrate, remember freedom. It's the first day of the festival of unleavened bread. We approach Jesus to ask him where to prepare the Passover meal. Go to the city and see a man with a pitcher of water who will meet us. Trusting his instruction, we headed off. Walking to the city, we began to talk about and ponder all that we've seen and heard as we've followed Jesus these past weeks. Jericho, Bethpage, Bethany, Jerusalem, we've been all over. We've heard his teachings, so many. He teaches with such authority, and we have so much to learn. His healing, he's healed so many needy people who need. 6 days ago, dinner with Lazarus. He was in the tomb for days, but Jesus called him out. Mary, the expensive perfume, we thought it was a waste, but Jesus riding the donkey, the palm branches, the cheers, as he overturned the money changer tables at the temple. So many things we don't yet understand, but oh, to be like Jesus. It's evening. Arriving at the upper room, we see Jesus reclined, completely relaxed, at peace. He's at the table. Walking through the door, we smell the Passover feast, perhaps lamb, bitter herbs. We see the olives and the bread that's been prepared. The table is prepared for this feast of celebration and remembrance, and the wine is poured. Jesus rises, takes off his robe, and wraps a towel around his waist and begins to wash our feet. Peter protests, but Jesus tells him, "Unless I wash you, you will not belong to me." So Peter tells Jesus, "Wash all of me then." We sit and eat the Passover meal. Jesus, deeply troubled, cries out, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Confused, looking at each other, we wonder, which one of us? Who? What's he talking about? Jesus tells Judas to hurry and do what you're going to do. Judas rises and he leaves. And as the treasurer, perhaps he went to pay for the food. We don't understand. Returning our attention to the meal, Jesus took some bread and he breaks it and he blesses it, breaking it into pieces and giving it to us. "Take and eat. This is my body, broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Let's take the bread. Returning our attention to the meal, Jesus lifts the cup of wine. He gives thanks to God for it. And as he passes it to us, he says, "Each of you drink from it. For this is my blood poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many." Let's take the cup. He goes on and says, "But then I tell you, from this moment, I will not drink of this fruit until that day, when I drink it in a new way in my Father's kingdom with you." You can open your eyes. Today we've spent some time with Jesus through his word, but one day he offers us the opportunity to share communion with him in his Father's kingdom. But we need to be with Jesus now. We need to follow him, and we need to be like him and do what Jesus does. Let's pray. Jesus, precious Savior and Redeemer, thank you for giving your life for us. Thank you for taking sin upon yourself and modeling the perfect sacrificial love. Thank you for being our great high priest, the one that we can come to confess our sin and to receive forgiveness, wholeness, healing, and freedom. And all the people say, amen.